Hey, look!
So Neil's going to do a little bit of a reading from the book, a couple of selected readings, and then we're going to get our panel together. And we have a fantastic panel. We're going to do this audience thing. Right, we have on our panel Pete Astor. We have on our panel Luke Haynes. You are allowed to boo, actually. And we have on our panel Dave Callahan. And maybe, if he can make it in time, John Robb. But he isn't here yet. So when he does come in, let's all boo him or something. Anyway, thanks for coming. Is the book available for sale this evening?
Yes.
Is there a plant in this audience?
Yes, if anyone who wants to buy the book, you've probably been turned off by that, but that little reading. But there are copies down at the end. My son, who's a sort of UCL student, has foregone revision and come along and is sitting at the table. There's also badges, postcards, and also, Pete, you've got something great special. Pete Siegel's also available.
It's a real gig here where you have to get the 2 metre kind of moat in front of the stage. Can't smell you from here.
We're going to do the moving forward. Can you do the Day of the Dead moving forward like 3 steps and frighten us a little bit? Please. No, go on. It'll be better for the people that, yeah. There you go. Perfect. Thank you.
It is all.
Marvellous.
Right, I'll go. That's better. Sit like hippies, you scum.
Hello, me again. Sorry. We're rather blessed tonight. I know Mark had done his introductions, but we've got Luke, we've got Dave, we've got Pete, John Robb's on his way, and because we're so spoiled, we've got not just one Andy, but 2 Andys. So there you go. So we're going to have a little sort of panel discussion, and I wanted to start, actually, Luke, with you, because I wanted you to just tell me about your coming into this whole environment, because you're obviously, a band like the Autors later, and the Servants later, and sort of, but how did you experience all of this?
Well, so I think I should probably fess up, and we've discussed this earlier anyway, that Dave is the only person who's actually on C86. I know I'm not. I know that this isn't really about C86, but it kind of sort of is, because it's called C86 something or other. So in my mind, it is. So I'm not even on C86. John Robb, he's not even here, let alone on C86. Where is he? He's bought an emissary. Are you John? I'm not. I don't want to.
Membrane here. Though.
Okay, right. I shall. Well, if John can be fucking bothered, then he can explain himself. But yes. Okay. To answer the question, I joined a band called the Servants just after they'd split up, which is always a good point to join a band, especially if it's kind of in the kind of like sue you, sue me kind of stage of the career. Obviously, the Servants weren't in that kind of bracket at any point. So I joined just as it had kind of they'd kind of done their thing really, and we kind of struggled on in various guises for about 5 years. This would be the end of 1986 till about 1991 or something like that. One of the things I remember that I think that Neil may have mentioned in the book, as he said to me, is that David, the singer from The Servants, didn't really actually want anything to do with C86 at the time, as he thought it would be I think it was viewed as slightly kind of anemic, fey, schmindy nonsense, certainly by myself and by him at the time. So he gave away a B-side, of, frankly, what was kind of a Syd Barrett knockoff that he wasn't very proud of, thinking that the C86 compilation cassette would kind of just go in the bin after that week of being on the front cover of the NME, and it didn't. And
it was never on the front cover, actually.
Was it not?
No, strange enough.
Where was it?
C81
Where was it? It was mail order. Well, even that, so you would have thought it would just have disappeared forever. In the sort of like the in the
Joe,
in the.
right, Southerners, John Rob's here.
He's taking your thunder, Luke.
Could I just say somewhat muted applause for John Robb, I think.
That's the way I like it. Yeah.
That's the way you get it, my son.
John, have to sit in the naughty chair over there.
7 event, John. Where was I? After I was so rudely interrupted.
What I wanted to ask you, Luke, wasn't what you did after that tape came out, but what were you doing at the time the tape came out, or before the time came out? What music were you doing, and how were you interacting in all of that?
You see, I wasn't really aware of the kind of a scene as such. I don't think it was a scene. I think Pete would probably know more about this than I would, because I was very away from that. I wanted to be I wanted to be in a band that was kind of like. I wanted to be like Black Sabbath or like the Alice Cooper band, really, and I ended up in the Servants, or a sort of version of it. So it was quite odd, and I didn't really know. I was very surprised that there was all these kind of bands that kind of wanted to sound like the Byrds and were wearing kind of stripy tops and all that, and I was. Anyone? John? No. Looking good, John. Yeah.
John,
shall I pass to John?
Please pass it to John if you don't mind. Yeah, John, you've only just arrived, but it seems appropriate that you should therefore have something to tell us. You could tell us about your day, or you could answer the question.
No one's interested in my day.
John said to me a few years ago that one of the aspects of C86, or the C86 in inverted commas, of course, is it was really C85, and this is something that was developing earlier, wasn't it?
Well, I would say it was C82, 83, really. We're going to get into a lot of C's here, aren't we?
Cherry Red will, if you let them.
Yeah. But there was a sense that when it came out, it was kind of came out after the whole thing had happened, you know. But it was great it came out because it was a marker. And it gave all those bands a window to be listened to, so that was good. It was a pain in the arse for our band, the members, because we didn't get on it, so we didn't get that little window, because in Japan, it really plays for you live. In Japan, people know all the bands on the C86, but if you weren't on the C86, they never heard of you. So it wasn't just us. I thought Nightingales and 3 Johns should have been on there as well, in a sense. Yeah, but this is a bit stupid, because it sounded like a critique of something that came out 31 years ago. And I actually think it was a really good thing, because it actually underlined like Dave's band, it's Bog-shed, Eyewitness, those kind of bands. And I liked the way it kind of, it was the 2 flanks of the scene. So it's like the janglier bands and the kind of more angular bands. So it was a little snapshot of the time, but missing some of the bands that... It would have helped us being on it and things, but I'm not bitter about it, Neil. because it wasn't
my fault.
It wasn't really the total high point in the 80s just to be on that cassette, really. Yeah.
You are the only person in the world who actually wanted to be on it.
Well, yeah, I'm not stupid, you know. I mean, it's. I make the music I like, and you just do the stuff that you do. But it's helpful to actually get people to hear it. So it's nice if John Peel plays your record, but you don't get your knees and ask him to play a record at a time. You don't say to Neil Taylor, "Please put me on your cassette." You just go, "Fucking twat, he didn't put me on." 30 years later, I should remind him of that fact. and the press as well. You have to get the enemy and all those kind of things, because that's how it worked then, didn't it? Otherwise, it was an uphill battle. But I'm ready for an uphill battle. I'm still fighting it now in a depressing kind of way. Yeah.
Brilliant. Dave, now you are the hallowed person in the room that was on the cassette.
Yeah, I'm actually bitter about being on it.
Can I also say that one of the sort of raison d'etre for writing the book was to not focus on C86 the cassette, and that's all we're doing. But anyway, carry on. Because you have a history that goes back.
I feel like Father Ted when he wins the Priest of the Year award. It's like, I'm going to pull a list of bastards out of my pocket.
But no, come on. I mean, you know.
What do you want me to say about it? It's
I
kind
don't
of...
want you to say anything about the tape. I want you to say something about what that period was like and what it was like being
the kind
immersed
of-
in it as a musician.
We were stuck in Romford in the suburbs, and we were out of any scene that you could possibly name. But the thing that kind of motivated us was we kind of grew up in kind of as teenagers listening to like the Slits and the pop group and the Fall, and that kind of scene developed, and there were loads. Every week there were dozens of really good independent singles coming out. You didn't know what to spend your pocket money on. You didn't know what to spend your part-time job money on. And it got to 81, and then the middle of 82, that just stopped dead. There was like hardly anything, apart from John and so forth, but there was hardly anything. And you were like, what are we supposed to fucking listen to now? Like ABC, like, you know. and there was nothing there. And so you started looking around. So we started going to see garage gigs like the Milkshakes and the Stingrays and listening to kind of Nuggets and Pebbles and stuff like that. But there was also really good stuff still going on, like the Gun Club and the Birthday Party. But there was nothing, if you like raw music, like basic music, there was like nothing in the music press hardly to excite you. And so we had to do it ourselves. And every little town and city around Britain, there wasn't really a scene, but everyone had their own little scene locally. We had our own little club called The Rares, and we used to book bands in, and because you'd just get bland people unless you looked around, you'd make contacts through fanzines and through people at other gigs, and end up booking the Membranes and the Servants and My Bloody Valentine when they were still kind of a jangly pop band, and even things like Screaming Blue Messiahs and stuff like that. There was a really exciting live scene that was getting a little bit of attention in the press, but not really enough to make it explode. And even when the Mary Chain happened, people just latched onto them and didn't really latch onto the other bands that were around. And a lot of us were doing stuff at the same time and didn't even know about them. But then you got the kind of, oh, they're all following on the coattails of the Mary Chain. That's how it works, what the hell. And it took us about 3 or 4 years to actually get any attention at all. And then lo and behold, we had this Enemy cassette, and they said, well, do you want to be on this? And we went, yeah, maybe. We'll just give you a shitty song that like no one likes, and you know, because we want to do our proper records on vinyl. And so we just gave them this, essentially a B-side, a song we'd written when we were 15. And suddenly we're on this thing that's sold 30,000 copies to people with vouchers and went on to sell, I don't know, is it nearly 6 figures when it was pressed up and stuff?
Probably.
So it was
Pete,
like classic idiocy, really.
Pete, now you obviously, Pete and I joined the Enemy sort of as stringers around about the same time, wasn't it? He was obviously, you know, much more capable than I was, but then went off and began and began his band, and out of a sense of honour decided he couldn't. Am I right in saying he decided he couldn't really write about? Well, certainly not the Loft. I don't think they stopped Bill doing it. They did it. Bill was quite good, but then he had a nom de plume, didn't he? So he was able to sort of write about it. Not me, you know, sort of. What? Jumping forward, why do you think we're still talking about today?
Yeah, no, it kind of...
Mark asked us to come.
That's a big question, isn't it? It's like, well, the answer is... just give me a second to think about it. It's... I don't... Yeah,
No, it's not that, because there's lots of things we're not talking about.
Well, on some level, yeah, the things that happened when, those moments where things, that's, we can't even go there, can we? Like things that happened when we were younger seem important, but actually aren't important. But maybe they are important. But I think the thing is with something like C86, to me, when I look back on it, it's something that we didn't want to be on, we didn't want anything to do with it, blah blah blah. But in time, it kind of looks kind of better now than it did then. So I kind of and it does make a certain sense to me that it didn't at the time, So that's just we got it wrong, like you always get it wrong, But that's all right, and then you learn, hopefully. So so things change. History changes things. You look back on stuff and it's better than it was. That's what I think.
I mean, the genesis of the tape. I mean, the development of it really. I mean, that's quite interesting because it sold quite slowly at the beginning, apparently, and then it didn't sort of pick up and burst out, but it just kept selling, and then it reached a point where they thought, well, it will stop selling now. And it didn't stop selling, and then it just kept selling all the way through 1987, in spite of some sort of quite severe. And I think uncalled for criticism. But when you think of it in the context of the NME, I mean, every 3 months they did a tape. I mean, they were advertising, you know, the psychedelic tape they did following on, you know, immediately after. And so the life expectancy was, you know, 12 weeks. But there you go. Dave, I just want to ask you, you had this kind of experience where you went through various strands of indie, if you like. I mean, you know, because you were playing at venues like the Clarendon.
Like Zelig.
And like Zelig.
Well, I shouldn't mention Woody Allen movies, sorry.
I mean, is it right to say that this sort of flowing in of all these channels, you know, eventually some bright spark decided that we can just market them all separately, and that, you know, now we have a kind of indie, or, you know, for a period we had an indie that became anodyne. I mean, you know, the ultimate manifestation being the kind of 90s Britpop bands that...
Not quite sure what your question is, but
can you answer it?
But that period in the 80s was kind of the first. Well, was the first kind of time where you had a whole bunch of music you could choose from to listen to and be influenced by, which is like so prevalent now because you can just go online and hear anything that was ever recorded virtually. But that was the time where you could quite easily listen to Astrud Gilberto, followed by the Standells, followed by the Slits. And you could be influenced by everything, and there was new hip hop coming out that was amazing. There was new indie that was coming out that was amazing. You had the post-hardcore scene, which had already Lee Gurney, as you say, brought over Sonic Youth to Woolwich Poly to play in the same weeks as Bog-shed and people like this as well. So nothing was fractioned then; it was all together, you know. And there's so much good music. I mean, the Young Gods were starting to do samples and stuff. You know, it was a fantastic period to hear new music, but it was nearly, to my ears anyway, all underground. And so while there wasn't a scene, you were hearing exciting things every time you turned on the radio late at night, or every time you went into a record shop in London or other small towns and asked to hear what was in that week, you know. So,
I mean,
does that answer your question that you didn't ask?
It sort of answers the question I didn't ask. My concern with the book was that the revisionism. Is that when we look back and we go, you know, we were doing this and we were doing that and we were doing the other. Now, I know Dave talked about Julian Cope's.
What kind of major record label in the 80s was signed a band like that up? It's tragic though, isn't it? Because I think we lost some really great music there.
Just to answer your question, Pete, yeah, on Bog-shed, I mean, one of the wonderful things, well, for me, as a sort of historian going through the material, was, I can't remember which one of Bog-shed said it, but it's either an Airstrip 1 fanzine or Melody Maker. They were asked at the time, how would you like Bog-shed to be remembered? And they answered, I'd like us to be forgotten completely.
That'd be the singer, Phil.
Yeah, it wasn't Phil.
Yeah, really dark.
It wasn't Phil.
Well, I stayed at his house.
Mark McQuaid, it was actually.
We stayed at his house a few times, and he was an art student at Leeds. And you have to hand in a piece of art to get your degree. And what he handed in was this absolutely fantastically awful collage, the basic rollers, with a piece of tartan on it, and one of the heads cut out and stuck on it. And he handed that in, and surprisingly, he failed. Yeah. but he kind of outsmarted them because it was so trashy. It was like, and that's what he was like. He was a genius. He was clever, and he had this really twisted view of the world. It was absolutely fantastic, and it's tragic that it's a footnote in everybody else's history. And it's great that we sort of talk about it. Anybody here who's not heard them, go and... I doubt they're even on Spotify. Find them on YouTube. They're really worth listening to. If someone in this room actually gets to discover them from this talk tonight, then that's a victory from this talk, I would say.
Well, my own personal experience is that I went up to Leeds in 1985, I guess, to interview them. And it was one of those situations where the interview was going to be a quarter page in the NME. You know, they always used to allocate how important the band were. You know, and this was definitely going to be a quarter page. And you just put the tape on, and it was so brilliant. You know, the whole thing that it ended up a page and a half. You know, on a band that no one had really heard of. But it was an incredible experience because I was staying in a hotel. And Phil met me, and I made the fatal mistake of saying to David Gedge, who was still living in Leeds at the time, come and meet us and have a drink. And, oh, God, Phil partly just ripped the piss out of David. I mean, it was just so embarrassing. It was just like, kind of. I mean, you didn't know how to deal with him when he was sort of absolutely flying. And I woke up at 4 o'clock and he was in my bed naked. And he left, and then that's another story. Exactly. Yeah. Sorry, I wanted to ask Pete. Okay, so these bands come along. Okay, we've got all of the. We've got the indie scene created. We've got the various kind of strands and endeavours. Pete, you had the experience of in a way, the whole thing of going from being on a fold your own labels, glue your own sleeves, put them in plastic covers thing to going to a major, and what was that like?
An error. I mean, the folding the sleeves thing was a tragedy in itself. When we got our first record out, and McGee went, "You're going to come." I'm not going to do the accent. "You're going to come over and fold your sleeves." We're like, "No, we're living the dream. We're not going to fold our fucking sleeves."
Oh no!
So he had to do it.
But you've got to tell them why the record was delayed.
Yeah, the record was delayed because Gillespie would steal the paper from the factory where he worked, and
yes, as I say in the book,
steal the paper.
There was a problem in acquiring the paper,
which was it's like technical hitch.
But anyway, so you went from that one.
Yeah, to the major. I mean, we were under McGee's auspice. I mean, it was through Warner Brothers. I mean, I don't subscribe to this notion that, Warner Brothers are the evil capitalists. I mean, if they give you a shitload of money, they're going to want you to play the game in a certain way, and we played the game, and we did sell more than Candle in the Wind in the first week. Kind of changed round after that a bit, unfortunately. But we started well, but we weren't cut out for it. But we were quite aware of what we were going into, and we didn't really pull it off. But we would have been better off staying on Creation. But it was we also we were ambitious.
Ambition, Luke. When you when you got the auteurs going, I mean, there was a different kind of level that you were kind of moving on to. Really, this wasn't 100 copies of a single folded and pasted, presumably.
No, but I think excuse me. I think things were only just starting to change.
Yeah.
At that point, if they were changing, I was kind of. I mean, you could have knocked me over with a feather. That we got a major deal, because I thought these kind of things were unattainable from the world that I came from, which was the sort of the 80s, world of what we now call indie. So it was, you didn't really think about, I know Pete was saying about his major label experience, but those kind of things seemed very rare, and it seemed that anyone that kind of got onto a major label, they were immediately kind of looked at with suspicion, and they made a deal with the devil and all this kind of thing, and they bought new. There was that band 530, who were kind of, I have no idea whether they were any good or not. I can't remember anything about them, other than the fact that they were treated with sort of disdain, because they'd signed to a major label and all this kind of stuff. And so that was still going on, but I just thought, well, fuck this.
Tales from the Attic NME article, which was published
in
December 1983. And he's bona fide. But part of the process of doing the book was trying to work out what primary source material has to take precedence. Everything else, hindsight, well, it's often swayed in a sort of in a way that when I talk to people now, I kind of think, was that really what was happening? But anyway, John, tell us a little bit about the politics of the time.
Well, actually, the first thing I want to talk about, I probably missed the first 15 minutes. You've probably done this already, but to me, post-punk was basically everybody got into punk, but didn't understand how to write in all those little towns. So people like us, well, you come from Romford, which is a little town, it's near London, so you're a bit more cooler than we were. We came from Blackpool, so there's no one to ask how to play music properly. So you're trying to play music and get it all back to front and wrong. And I think that was actually, to me, that actually defines what post-punk was. It was like a generation of people couldn't go on YouTube and watch how to play the guitar solo. It didn't exist. There was no older people to say, how do you play a guitar solo? Because they wouldn't speak to you anyway. And you were just kind of lost in this vacuum. And that's where all the great music came from. And that, to me, defines post-punk, which is actually part one of what you're calling C86, which is kind of like post-post-punk in a sense, wasn't it? If we're going to proto-post-post-punk, if we're going to do like stupid terms on it. Now, the politics of it... It's remarkable to believe these days when you read like Morrissey interviews that people like him were kind of on the left at that time, weren't they? And they kind of like gone over there. I know as you get older, you're meant to get a bit more Tory, but Jesus, that's a journey he's been on, isn't it? So and it was quite an ideological left-wing anarchistic scene as well.
Forget, he did say reggae is vile quite early on.
Yeah, but that saying reggae is vile doesn't make you racist in a sense, does it? Because he likes ska music as well. So he's an awkward fucker. Anyway, I don't know about Morrissey.
Morrissey is actually very old left.
So left is right. It's good. Jesus.
No. In terms of wants to abolish the monarchy, but he's pro-Brexit. That's very old left.
Yeah. And there's other things that he talks about which are slightly more awkward, aren't they? But
It's not.
just the old left that people I knew wouldn't say some of the things he comes out with. But I don't want to talk about him because I mean, it's actually his album's quite good, you know. But what he shouldn't do interviews, I don't think. But so, but we kind of got lost on that one because we talk about the politics of the time, and it was miners' strike. It was kind of like the punk rock politics. It was DIY. Which is odd actually because there is an argument that DIY is actually Thatcherism in its purest form, isn't it? Like we all form little corner shops, but we didn't have any choice. EMI won't give us any money, would they? You had to put your own records out. So it was ideological. It was naive. It was kind of post-teenage, but. How fucking cool is that, you know, to be idealistic about the world? You don't... These days, people over 30 aren't very idealistic, are they? The new generation of under 25s are quite exciting, aren't they? I think it's...
Corbynistas.
Yeah, you know, I think you know, when I was at Glastonbury, when I've been going around the country, when you've been meeting people, it's actually fucking hell, they can actually save the country, because my generation fucked it up, you know. After the Brexit thing, and I was thinking, look, Jesus, you went through punk and you ended up like that. These are people I knew and stuff. It was sad, really, you know. But these are people that went through at the time, you know, that kind of thing. You know, that they went through all these debates, all these ideas, all the things going around, and they still ended up being on the wrong side of the equation, didn't they? So that was, if you want to talk about the politics of that time, that's what it was in the bands. I don't know about the audience, because the audience is always different for bands, but that's what... And it wasn't like a straight ideological debate. It wasn't a manifesto. So you have the Three Johns, who were a very political band, but they didn't do straight political songs. They did kind of surreal songs. It was like Captain Beefheart if he'd been like a communist, wasn't it, or something?
Like
you know,
glam mixed with Beefheart, yeah.
And Goth as well. There's quite a lot of Bauhaus in their sound as well. And they were fantastic bands, one of the greatest bands I've ever seen. Still, I think they're amazing like band at the time. And what they talked about was good as well. We're all doing those kind of miners' benefits, which are kind of awkward, weren't they? Because the miners. You do with the miners as well, and I don't think they've ever seen people like us before. So you get this kind of little tension, then you always realise that, oh, look, the weirdos are all right, they're with us. And so that was okay as well.
I think I mentioned this in the book, but Billy Bragg, when he did Jobs for Workers, one of the many causes that he supported the GLC, Jobs for Workers, trying to get people to vote, the whole red wedge thing. He wanted to do a gig in Derby at the local miners' club, and the miners' secretary wrote back and said, why do you want to come here? And he said, well, there'll be lots of young people, but we don't have young people here. so it was difficult. Pete, Luke, I'll bring you back in a minute. I just wanted to ask you, Pete, obviously, the sort of marquee names in this indie period, or some of them at least, you know, when one thinks of the record labels, Creation and Vinyl Drip and Pink, Subway, Ron Johnson. Pete, you were really obviously in the thick of the whole things with Creation. Pete, there's a great photograph which many of you may have seen of Pete looking up at Robert Lloyd on the opening night of the Living Room and working out how he can sort of supplant this guy, or perhaps not. But what was that whole?
No, that was my mistake. I should have been plotting at that moment in time, but I wasn't. I was just like, yeah, this is fantastic. Yeah. I mean, I wrote about them for the NME at the time, But yeah.
Yeah. And,
No,
and how did you, the whole creation experience, you know, for people that were not exposed to the madness?
The main thing which fits with what everybody's sort of saying is that there was a sort of alternative is a thing now. Alternative is a brand, but in those days we couldn't get a show at, I don't know, the Rock Garden or those kind of mainstream places. We couldn't get it, and the only place we could maybe get to play was somewhere like the Living Room, which is the Adams Arms. So we went there and we gave Alan a tape, which he didn't like, but he said, "Well, you can play anyway," and we played, and he grew to like us.
Wanted you to change your name?
Yeah, there was the whole. We were called the Living Room. Yeah, which we thought was quite a good name. Although the sort of test department style architects really that we used to rehearse in their house, they used to say there's like room to live. They liked that, and we were like, that sounds a bit Nazi to us. So we.
Yeah, that's Lebensraum,
yeah.
the Nazi geographical expansion.
Yes, so we were not happy with that. But no, we were called the Living Room. There was a kind of there was obviously a branding issue there. It looks a bit lame that we're playing at a club. So we changed our name. We moved in a different part of the house, and we became the Loft. Yes.
Dave, no, obviously, Pink. You were involved in Pink.
Well, Pink was the kind of label that people who wanted to be on Creation but weren't allowed to be ended up on. Plus that Petrol Emotion, who were great and weren't on C86 either. But Pink was seriously underfunded, and they kind of batted above their station really by getting us and McCarthy and that Petrol Emotion. I guess I didn't like him much, but Jamie Wednesday became Carter, the Unstoppable Sex Machine.
June Brides?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, small matter of the June Brides.
June Bride's #1 indie chart album, yeah. No, funnily enough, we only got signed to Pink because I went to a June Brides gig and I gave a cassette to the boss of Pink under the instructions of a friend. Simon, indeed, yes, that's right, yes. I'm getting prompts here. And then I was still living with my mum at the time, and he rang up my house at 2 a.m. and said, "Look, I've listened to your tape. It's kind of all right. I like the slide guitar. Do you want a record deal?" And so he wouldn't wake up my mum. I just said yes and put the phone down. So that's how we ended up signed. I think we probably would have broken up 6 months later if that hadn't happened. So.
There's a
exactly. This is he didn't send you demo to like Carling sponsored radio station online and then like do a video and you know.
The first incarnation of the Servants, pre-Luke, on those lines, I think it was Phil King who said that Alan McGee rang up or somebody rang up because they'd got the demo tape, and I think it was Phil King. Phil's dad answered the phone in his suburban house, you know, with his, and McGee said, "Can I speak to one of the servants?" And his dad said, "We don't have servants." And that was it. That was history all ruined. Because, you know, they would have got a record deal, but they couldn't get a record deal. Luke.
That explains my feud with McGee, you see, all these years. I didn't know, you know. Can I say also, it's nice to be in a room where the name Jamie Wednesday is mentioned and someone boos. You don't get that often. Sorry, carry on.
No. John, I wanted to ask you, part of the whole correcting exercise in the book was to give those the more caustic bands that got stupidly labelled under the twee element, you know, their due. John's book, Death to Trad Rock, which I stole quite freely from, it's an absolutely brilliant book. But obviously, many bands in there. But Bog-shed, I mean, I just wanted to talk about Bog-shed, you know, the whole tragedy and Phil.
Amazing band. I think without Bog-shed, you don't have League of Gentlemen. I'd love to meet the guys who wrote League of Gentlemen because they must be Bog-shed fans. The whole vibe of that programme is like a Bog-shed sleeve and a Bog-shed record. They're a great lost band. I think they're an amazing band. I think because the name sounds a bit silly, then people don't take them seriously, you know. But they made really great records, especially the early records. Really quirky, really wonky, really strange lyrics and a really odd atmosphere about them. And it sounded, like you say, like two of them are dead now, aren't they? So
well, I mean, Mike Bryson had said to me that that leaving Vinyl Drip was just a complete megalomanic kind of like where we think
No,
we can do this.
I can't run a record label. I only put people's records out because I'm trying to help them out. Even nowadays, who's got the time? You have to be like a sociopath to run a record label. You have to like have. It's bad enough being in a band. I put these records out with people like Bog-shed because I wanted somebody else to put the record out who could do it properly, you know. So when they left, it was a relief, even though their record had done really well. It was the best-selling record I put out. But I felt guilty because
How many did it sell?
it sold about 10,000 that first that little mini album. So I thought, well, surely they can get onto a bigger independent label and just go like that. But Stump in the end got the big deal, didn't they? Because Stump were a great band, but because they were in London and because they were just that little bit more slick, I would say, they had the opportunity of getting onto a major label. And it was great. It felt like a victory when Stump got there. But at the same time, you think if only Bog-shed could have got that kind of deal as well. But Bog-shed was so warty and weird and northern that, you know, what kind of major record label in the 80s would sign a band like that up? It's tragic, though, isn't it? Because I think we lost some really great music there.
Just to answer your question, Pete, yeah, on Bog-shed, I mean, one of the wonderful things, well, for me, as a sort of historian going through the material, was, I can't remember which one of Bog-shed said it, but it's either an Airstrip 1 fanzine or Melody Maker. They were asked at the time, how would you like Bog-shed to be remembered? And they answered, I'd like us to be forgotten completely.
That'd be the singer, Phil.
Yeah, it wasn't Phil.
Yeah,
It
really
wasn't
dark.
Phil. It wasn't Phil.
Well, I stayed at his house.
Mark McQuaid, it was actually.
We stayed at his house a few times, and he was an art student at Leeds. And when he went to, you have to hand in a piece of art to get your degree. And what he handed in was this absolutely fantastically awful collage, the Basic Rollers, with a piece of tartan on it, and one of the heads cut out and stuck on it. And he handed that in, and surprisingly, he failed. Yeah. but he kind of outsmarted them because it was so trashy. It was like, and that's what he was like. He was a genius. He was clever, and he had this really twisted view of the world. It was absolutely fantastic, and it's tragic that it's a footnote in everybody else's history. And it's great that we sort of talk about it. Anybody here who's not heard them, go and... I doubt they're even on Spotify. Find them on YouTube. They're really worth listening to. If someone in this room actually gets to discover them from this talk tonight, then that's a victory from this talk, I would say.
Well, my own personal experience is that I went up to Leeds in 1985, I guess, to interview them. And it was one of those situations where the interview was going to be a quarter page in NME. You know, they always used to allocate how important the band were. You know, and this was definitely going to be a quarter page, and you just put the tape on, and it was so brilliant. You know, the whole thing that it ended up a page and a half. You know, on a band that no one had really heard of. But it was an incredible experience because I was staying in a hotel, and Phil met me, and I made the fatal mistake of saying to David Gedge, who was still living in Leeds at the time, come and meet us and have a drink. And, oh, God, Phil partly just ripped the piss out of David Gedge. I mean, it was just so embarrassing. It was just like, you know, kind of... I mean, you didn't know how to deal with him when he was sort of absolutely flying. And I woke up at 4 o'clock and he was in my bed naked. And he left, and then, that's another story. Exactly, yeah. Sorry, I wanted to ask Pete. Okay, so these bands come along. Okay, we've got all of the, we've got the indie scene created. We've got the various, you know, kind of strands and endeavours. Pete, you had the experience of, like, in a way, the whole thing of going from being on a fold your own labels, glue your own sleeves, put them in plastic covers thing, to going to a major. And what was that like?
An error. I mean, the folding the sleeves thing was a tragedy in itself. When we got our first record out, and McGee went, "You're going to come," I'm not going to do the accent, "You're going to come over and fold your sleeves." We're like, "No, we're living the dream. We're not going to fold our fucking sleeves."
Oh, no.
So he had to do it.
But you've got to tell them why the record was delayed.
Yeah, the record was delayed because Gillespie would steal the paper from the factory where he worked, and
yes, as I say in the book,
steal the paper.
There was
so
a problem in acquiring the paper,
which was it's like technical hitch.
But anyway, so you went from that one.
Yeah, to the major. I mean, we were under McGee's auspice. I mean, it was through Warner Brothers. I mean, I mean, I don't subscribe to this notion that, you know, Warner Brothers are the evil capitalists. I mean, if they give you a shitload of money, they're going to want you to play the game in a certain way, and we played the game, and we did sell more than Candle in the Wind in the first week. Kind of changed round after that a bit, unfortunately. But you know, we started well, but we weren't cut out for it. You know, but we were quite aware of what we were going into, and we didn't really pull it off. But you know, we would have been better off staying on Creation. But you know, it was we also, you know, we were ambitious. You know.
Ambition, Luke. When you you know, when you got the auteurs going, I mean, there was a different kind of level that you were kind of moving on to. Really, this wasn't 100 copies of a single folded and pasted, presumably.
No, but I think it, excuse me. I think things were only just starting to change.
Yeah.
At that point, if they were changing, I was kind of. I mean, you could have knocked me over with a feather, you know, that we got a major deal. Because I thought these kind of things were unattainable from the world that I came from, which was the sort of the 80s, you know, world of what we now call indie. So it was, you didn't really think about, you know, I know Pete was sort of saying about his major label experience, but those kind of things seemed very rare, and it seemed that anyone that kind of got onto a major label, they were immediately kind of looked at with suspicion, and they made a deal with the devil and all this kind of thing, and they bought new. There was that band 530, who were kind of. I have no idea whether they were any good or not. I can't remember anything about them, other than the fact that they were treated with sort of disdain because they'd signed to a major label and all this kind of stuff. And so that was still going on. But I just thought, well, fuck this. You know, the major label's given me a truckload of money. I didn't actually have to do anything with the album. The album was already recorded. We recorded it ourselves. They didn't ask us to do any changes to it. And I thought, fuck this. I'm going to take the money. This is the album. If I make one album, it's done. I've done it the way I wanted to do it. You know, you can't really interfere with it much more than that. And weirdly, they didn't for 10 years, for some fucking insane reason that I have no idea what happened. It's not like I had pictures of the head of the label in kind of compromising positions or anything like that. I was kind of hidden away. Well, yeah, it'll all come out soon. I was kind of hidden away from the accountants and stuff like that. I was given money I made a record called Baader Meinhof in 1996, and they gave me like 20 grand to record it, and they gave me an advance on top of that. It was fucking insane. And they didn't come down to the studio once. They let me do what I wanted to do, and I just brought the record in, played it on a DAT. Dave, the head of A&R, just sparked up a joint. We smoked a joint, listened to it. He said, "This is fucking great. Let's put it out." Fine, fucking great. Let's do that. So I think I had a really, really unusual experience of major record labels.
Right. but I mean,
I don't think
that's fantastic.
I think when you sign to a major record label, what I think is that. This is putting it kind of in a simplistic way, that they're sometimes more honest with their dishonesty than indie labels are. And I've been signed to quite a lot of independent labels, and I'm still owed quite a lot of money from them, put it that way. So I'm not a great believer in the sort of independent label dream. I think a lot of that is a kind of foisted upon us by nice ideas that the NME once had about, let's all live in a kind of, socialist kibbutz with Jeff Travis. Huh? Yeah, of course. Yeah, exactly, as John says. But I think it's more about independent thinking than independent labels, really. That kind of thing. So.
Thank you. Has anybody got any questions? I can answer the first one. I think the bar shuts at 11. Would anybody like to ask this distinguished panel any questions?
When are you going to retire?
Question over here. Shout, please.
Neil, having worked there at that time at the NME, it was kind of interesting to see the dynamic that was going on between, the new soul boys and the indie kids. How easy was it to fight the corner back in those days in terms of getting the stuff you wanted to write about covered?
Well, I think it was. I think the whole hip hop indie wars was slightly overplayed.
Goodbye.